The mining colony called New Haven had gone quiet. For 3 whole days, nobody heard anything from the people who lived there. When the distress signal finally reached the Galactic Council's watching station, the aliens who ran it did not care much. They thought it was just broken equipment, making noise again. Humans were new to space. They had only met aliens 20 years ago. Their ships were not as good as alien ships. Their weapons were weaker. Their knowledge of the stars was small. The alien races looked down on them. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the command deck of his ship, the USS Defiant. He looked at the dark planet below, through the big window. His ship had been flying patrol duty in the outer areas when the emergency call reached them. He did not wait for permission. He ordered his crew to change course right away. Something inside told him this was serious. Lieutenant Amy Parker sat at her station, watching the sensor screens. She looked up at Jake with worry in her eyes. "Sir, I am picking up life signs. They are weak, but they are there. Deep underground in caves. About 2 kilometers down." Jake nodded. His face was hard and set. "Get a landing team ready. Everyone needs full protective suits and heavy equipment. If people are trapped down there, we are going to get them out." The Galactic Council had sent clear orders. Humans should wait for approval before doing any rescue work. But Jake had learned something important during his years in space. Sometimes, doing the right thing meant ignoring the people in charge. His crew of 48 men and women started getting ready without question. They trusted their commander. The small shuttle flew down through the thin air of New Haven. Jake could see the destruction below them. The main dome where people lived had fallen in. All the buildings around it were buried under tons of rock and dirt. Whatever happened here had been terrible. Greg Hamilton was flying the shuttle. He called out from the pilot seat. "Commander, the ground is shaking. This whole area is not stable. It could collapse more." Jake kept his eyes on the view below. The shuttle landed on a flat area of rock near the fallen mine entrance. Jake led his team out into the alien world. Their boots made crunching sounds on the strange soil. Far away, 3 big alien ships floated in the sky. They were watching but not helping. The bug-like Thrix were there. The jelly-like Quorum were there. The crystal beings called Vexar were there. They all sent observers to watch, but none of them sent people to help rescue anyone. Lieutenant Paul Chen walked up to Jake. He held a scanner in his hands. "I found the main air pocket where people are alive. 27 survivors, and 12 of them are children. But sir, the way down is blocked by special compressed rock. Our tools cannot cut through it." Jake smiled, but there was no happiness in it. "Then we dig around it." For the next 18 hours, the human crew worked without stopping to rest. They burned through solid rock with plasma-cutting tools. When tunnels started to fall in, they put up support beams to hold them. When their machines stopped working, they moved rocks with their bare hands. The Galactic Council observers kept sending messages. They said the humans should give up. They said the math showed it was impossible to succeed. Jake deleted every message without reading them. Lieutenant Karen White was the team's doctor. She was the first person to break through to where the trapped colonists were hiding. The survivors were a mix of humans and a few alien traders called Dalthine, who had been visiting the colony when disaster struck. They had no water. They were scared. Some of them were badly hurt. Karen knelt down next to a small human child. She spoke in a calm, steady voice. "We have got you now. We are taking you home." The rescue team worked to get everyone out. They carried people who could not walk. They gave water to those who needed it. They wrapped blankets around shaking shoulders. Every person was treated with care. As the last survivor was lifted up to safety, the ground started shaking hard. The whole cave system was falling apart. Jake shouted into his radio. "Everyone out now. Get to the shuttle." He personally carried a young Dalthine child in his arms as his team ran for their lives. The mountain was turning to dust behind them. Rocks fell from above. The ground cracked under their feet. They got into the shuttle just in time. Greg pushed the engines to full power. The shuttle lifted off as the entire area collapsed into a giant hole. Through the back window, they could see the mountain disappear into a cloud of dust. On the medical deck of the USS Defiant, Karen and her medical staff worked to save the injured people. They set broken bones. They gave medicine for pain. They treated burns and cuts. Hours passed as they worked without rest. In the end, every single survivor lived. Not one person died. The Galactic Council observers sent an official complaint. They said humans were reckless. They said humans did not follow proper rules. They said humans acted on emotion instead of logic. Jake read the complaint and put it in the trash. Then he set course for the nearest space station to drop off the survivors. News about the rescue spread fast through the galaxy. The alien species who had thought humans were weak and stupid started to think again. There was something different about these newcomers from Earth, something that could not be measured by the power of their weapons or the speed of their ships. The Vexar, beings made of living crystal who had lived for thousands of years, discussed it in their council chambers. The Thrix, who calculated everything with mathematical precision, could not explain it with numbers. The Quorum, who drifted through space and avoided all conflict, were confused by it. Humans did not give up. Even when the smart choice was to run away, they stayed and fought. Even when the numbers said they would fail, they tried anyway. Even when helping others put them in danger, they helped. On the observation ship, a young Thrix named Elle watched the human shuttle dock with the USS Defiant. Zell had studied human behavior for months and still did not understand them. An older Thrix named Zix stood beside Zell. "They make no sense," Zell said. 27 lives saved, but they risked 48 lives to do it. The mathematics do not support the decision. Zix was quiet for a long time. Finally, the old observer spoke. "Like what?" Zell asked. "I do not know yet," Zix admitted. "But I think we are going to learn." Far away on Earth, in the cities where humans lived, people heard about what Commander Jake Morrison and his crew had done. Parents told their children the story. Teachers talked about it in schools. It became another example of what humans believed. That every life mattered. That you never left people behind. That doing the right thing was more important than doing the safe thing. The galaxy was starting to learn what it meant when humans said they would help. It meant they would come. No matter how far. They would fight. No matter how hard. They would try. No matter the odds. And they would not stop until everyone was safe. 3 months had passed since the rescue at New Haven. Humanity's name was known across the galaxy now, but the reputation was mixed. The alien races respected human determination, but criticized their emotional choices. The older species believed that pure logic should guide all decisions. Humans seemed to operate on feelings and instincts that made no sense to them. Captain Lisa Morgan commanded Outpost 7, a small listening station on the edge of dangerous space. The post was home to 30 people, mostly scientists and communication workers. Their job was to monitor the fragile peace between the Galactic Council and an aggressive enemy called the Krell Empire. The Krell were warriors. They had evolved from the most dangerous predators on a planet with crushing gravity. For decades, they had been pushing against Council borders, testing defenses, looking for weak spots. The Council always responded with careful planning and diplomatic talks. They calculated acceptable losses and negotiated buffer zones between territories. When 15 Krell warships appeared near Outpost 7, Lisa immediately sent out a distress call. The nearest Council fleet was 6 days away. The official orders came through quickly. The outpost should evacuate right away. All personnel should leave. And all sensitive equipment should be destroyed. Lisa called her senior staff to the command center. Lieutenant Commander Sam Torres, her second in command, stood beside her as she spoke to the team. "The Council wants us to run," she said in a clear voice. "They have sent evacuation orders. But if we leave, the Krell will use this position to attack deep into Council space. Thousands of people could die. Sam looked at her and nodded. So we stay. Lisa met his eyes. We stay. We hold this station as long as we can. We give the fleet time to get here. I will not order anyone to remain. This is volunteer only. Anyone who wants to leave can go now. Every single member of her crew stepped forward. Not one person chose to leave. The Krell attacked within an hour. Their ships were huge, covered with weapons, built to win through pure firepower. Outpost 7 had defensive shields and a few automated gun platforms. These defenses were meant to scare off pirates, not fight military fleets. Ensign Kyle Rogers sat at the tactical station. He called out readings as the attack began. Shields at 60% already. They are hitting the northern section hard. Lisa studied the tactical screen. Her mind worked through possibilities. Change the shield frequency. Make them work harder for every hit. And turn on the minefield. We're mined. See in 2. The minefield was a last resort defense. Old-fashioned explosive charges floated in a ring around the station. They would damage attacking ships, but once they were gone, the outpost would be completely vulnerable. The first group of Krell fighters hit the mines. Space lit up with explosions, but more fighters kept coming through the fire. For 3 days, the crew of Outpost 7 fought without stopping. They took power from life support systems and put it into shields. When automated weapons failed, they operated them by hand. They repaired damage as fast as it happened. They worked in 4-hour shifts, sleeping at their stations, eating food bars while watching their screens. Dr. Helen Price worked around the clock in the medical bay. She treated injuries from exploding consoles, radiation exposure, and pure exhaustion. She never complained. She never suggested they should surrender. Like everyone else, she had made her choice. On the second day, the Krell sent a message. Their commander offered terms. If the humans surrendered the station without destroying it, the crew would be taken as prisoners instead of being killed. By Krell standards, this was an honorable offer. Lisa's response was short. Negative. This station stands. The Krell commander seemed almost happy with the answer. By the third day, the shields were failing. Ammunition was almost gone. Half the crew was injured. Lisa stood on the bridge in her torn uniform, bloodstains on her clothes, preparing for what she knew would be the final attack. That was when the USS Valiant arrived. Right behind it came the USS Guardian and the USS Phoenix. 3 human ships, not the biggest or strongest in the fleet, but crewed by men and women who had heard their own people were in trouble. They had pushed their engines past safe limits to arrive 2 days early. Behind the human ships came the Council fleet. A massive group of warships, led by the powerful Vexar dreadnoughts. The Krell pulled back immediately. They were aggressive warriors, but they were not suicidal. As repair teams boarded Outpost 7, the Vexar fleet commander sent a message to Lisa. The crystal being's words were translated by computers, but something in the tone might have been respect. Your species fights without logic, Captain Morgan. You risk everything for symbolic victories. It is inefficient. Lisa smiled through her exhaustion. Her face was covered in dirt and dried blood. Maybe so, but we are still here. The repair crews worked for days to fix Outpost 7. The station had been hit by hundreds of weapons. Whole sections were destroyed, but the structure held because the crew had held. Lisa walked through the damaged corridors, checking on her people. Everyone was tired. Many were hurt, but they were alive, and they had won. Sam Torres found her in the observation room, looking out at the stars. The Council is sending an official commendation, he said. They are also sending a formal reprimand for not following evacuation orders. Lisa laughed, though it hurt her bruised ribs. Sounds about right. Was it worth it? Sam asked quietly. Lisa looked at him. We saved thousands of lives. We showed the Krell that the Council will fight back. We proved that humans keep their word when they say they will defend something. She paused. Yes, it was worth it. News of the defense of Outpost 7 spread across the galaxy just like the story of New Haven had. The pattern was becoming clear. When humans said they would stand and fight, they meant it. When they committed to defending something, they did not back down. The Vexar Council discussed this in their chambers of crystal and light. They lost half their defensive capability, one council member said. They suffered 40% casualties. By any logical measure, they should have evacuated. Another Vexar elder pulsed with thoughtful colors. And yet, they achieved their objective. The station still stands. The Krell advance was stopped. Perhaps their logic is simply different from ours. The Thrix had similar conversations. The Quorum debated it in their liquid tanks. Even the aggressive Krell talked about it among their warriors. One Krell commander spoke to his officers after the battle. I have fought many species. Most run when outnumbered. Some fight and die quickly. But these humans fought like they could not lose. Even when their shields failed, even when their weapons ran empty, they kept fighting. I do not understand it, a younger Krell warrior asked. Is it madness? The commander thought for a long time. No. It is something else. Something we do not have a word for. Back on Outpost 7, the crew slowly recovered. Some would be sent home for medical treatment. Others would stay and help rebuild. Lisa would remain as commander. Her request approved, despite the reprimand. On her desk was a message from Jake Morrison, the commander who had led the New Haven rescue. It was short and simple. Heard about your stand. Well done. The galaxy is learning what we already know. Humans do not quit. Morrison out. Lisa saved the message. Then she got back to work. There were reports to file, systems to repair, and a station to rebuild. But more than that, there was a message to send to the galaxy. A message that said humans meant what they promised. When they said they would defend you, they would defend you. When they said they would stand with you, they would stand. No matter the cost, no matter the odds, no matter what. The Galactic Council met on Threshold Station, a huge diplomatic complex that orbited a neutron star at the center of the galaxy. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the Grand Chamber. Their forms ranged from beings that looked almost human to creatures that were completely alien. Ambassador Claire Foster represented humanity. She was a former diplomat who had been crucial during first contact with alien life. She sat in the Earth delegations area, watching as the Council debated the newest crisis facing the galaxy. The plague had started on Dalthene Prime, the homeworld of a gentle, peaceful species called the Dalthene. The disease spread through their population with terrifying speed. It was a hemorrhagic fever that killed within days of infection. What made it worse was that it jumped between species. Quorum traders who visited the planet got sick. Thrix diplomats stationed there became infected too. The Council's response was clinical and precise. They quarantined the entire Dalthene system. Automated defense platforms surrounded the planet to make sure no ship could leave. The infected would stay there until the plague either burned itself out or a cure was found. The problem was simple and terrible. The Dalthene medical system was collapsing. Doctors and nurses were dying alongside their patients. Supply chains had broken down. Food was running out. Water treatment plants were failing. The quarantine was necessary to protect the galaxy, but it was a death sentence for millions of Dalthene. Claire listened to the debate with growing frustration. The Vexar calculated acceptable casualty numbers. The Thrix discussed the statistical probability of developing a vaccine within different time frames. The Quorum proposed simply waiting for the epidemic to end naturally, allowing evolution to create immune survivors. Nobody was talking about saving the people who were dying right now. Earth requests permission to speak, Claire announced, activating her delegation's communication system. The Council's attention turned to the human section. The presiding arbiter, a massive Vexar, whose crystal form glowed with bio-light, acknowledged her. Ambassador Foster, humanity's voice is recognized. Claire stood up. Her image was projected large in the center of the chamber. We are listening to plans and calculations and statistics. But nobody is talking about going down there and helping those people. The Thrix representative clicked its mantis-like limbs in agitation. The quarantine is absolute. To break it would risk spreading the plague throughout the galaxy. Then we send volunteers, Claire replied. People willing to accept the risk. Medical teams, supplies, engineers. To fix infrastructure. We have doctors trained to work in contaminated environments. We have engineers who can restore power and water systems. The Quorum representative gurgled from its containment tank. You propose sending your people to certain infection. This is emotional thinking, not strategic. Yes, Claire agreed firmly. It is emotional. Because those are people dying down there, not just numbers on a report. And if we have the ability to help them, and we choose not to, then what kind of galactic community have we built? The council debated for hours. Many species were against the idea. They said it was too risky. They said it would accomplish nothing. They said it would waste valuable human resources. Finally, they agreed to allow one human medical mission. But there were conditions. The volunteers had to understand they would be subject to the same quarantine as the Dalthene. Nobody who entered the system would be allowed to leave until the plague was completely contained. It was a one-way trip until the crisis ended, and nobody knew when or if that would happen. The call for volunteers went out through Earth's military and civilian networks. They needed doctors, nurses, engineers, logistics specialists, and security personnel. They needed people willing to risk everything to help strangers from an alien world. Within 24 hours, 3,000 people had applied. They could only take 200. Dr. Richard Cole was chosen to lead the medical team. He had worked in epidemic zones on Earth. He had seen the worst diseases humanity had ever faced and helped stop them from spreading. As the transport ship USS Mercy got close to Dalthene Prime, he gave his team one final briefing. We are going into hell. He told them honestly. The death rate is 70% for Dalthene. We do not know what it will be for humans. Cooled, two more. Our protective equipment will help, but it will not make us invincible. Some of us will not make it home. He looked around at the faces of his team. Young and old. Men and women from every part of Earth. But down there are people who need us. Children watching their parents die. Doctors working until they collapse from exhaustion. A whole civilization on the edge of extinction. We are going to help them. We are going to save as many as we possibly can. And we are going to show the galaxy what humanity stands for. The USS Mercy entered orbit around Dalthene Prime. The team prepared to go down to the surface. The Dalthene capital was a nightmare. Bodies lined the streets because there was nobody left to bury them. Hospitals were so full that sick people lay in hallways. The infrastructure was failing everywhere. Power cut out randomly. Water was contaminated. Food supplies were almost gone. But the human team got to work immediately. They set up field hospitals in parks and public spaces. They distributed supplies from their ship. They began treating patients with every tool and medicine they had brought. Dr. Cole worked 18-hour shifts. He moved from patient to patient in his environmental suit, which was soaked with sweat inside. The suit kept him safe from the disease, but it was hot and uncomfortable. Nurse Jenny Blake worked beside him. She held the hand of a dying Dalthene child, singing a soft song from Earth as the young alien's breathing slowed and finally stopped. Tears ran down her face inside her helmet, but she stayed until the end. The child did not die alone. Engineer Pete Marshall and his team restored power to 3 hospitals. They worked through exhaustion and constant fear of getting infected. Every wire they touched might be contaminated. Every surface could carry the virus. Security Chief Linda Hayes organized supply distribution. She made sure food and medicine reached the areas that needed it most. She stopped riots before they could start. She kept order in chaos. Inevitably, team members began falling ill. The protective suits were good, but not perfect. Small tears happened. Seals failed. Accidents occurred. The plague claimed its first human victim on day 12, a young doctor named Chris Allen, then 3 more by day 20. But for every human who fell sick, dozens of Dalthene were saved. Dr. Cole worked frantically in his lab, studying the virus under a microscope. He analyzed blood samples. He tested different combinations of medicines. He barely slept. On day 37, he made a breakthrough. He isolated the virus's protein structure and developed a working vaccine. It was made from human antibodies combined with Dalthene immune cells, a hybrid treatment that would not have been possible without both species working together. The vaccine was produced as fast as possible. Every manufacturing facility that still worked was converted to make it. Within 2 weeks, mass vaccination began. The plague was contained within 60 days of the human team's arrival. The quarantine was lifted after 90 days. Medical ships from across the galaxy arrived to help with the final recovery efforts. Of the 200 humans who had volunteered, 43 had died from the plague. Their names were carved on a monument in the Dalthene capital. They were honored alongside the Dalthene heroes who had given their lives fighting the disease. The Galactic Council watched all of this happen. They had calculated the risks and determined the mission would likely fail. They had predicted that the volunteers would die without accomplishing anything meaningful. But humanity had succeeded through determination and willingness to sacrifice for others. The Vexar Council held a special session to discuss what had happened. "We were wrong," one elder admitted. "We calculated that the mission had a 92% chance of total failure." Another Vexar pulsed with contemplative colors. "Perhaps we are calculating the wrong things. We measure probability of success, but humans measure necessity of trying." On Dalthene Prime, the survivors began rebuilding their civilization. They would never forget what the humans had done. Schools taught children about the brave volunteers from Earth. Statues were built, stories were told, and across the galaxy, other species started to understand something important. Humans did not make decisions based only on logic or probability. They made decisions based on what was right. And sometimes, doing what was right meant accepting terrible risks. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was showing them a different way to live. The war began without warning or declaration. The Krell Empire had been watching Council defenses for years, studying patrol routes, mapping fleet positions. When they finally attacked, it was with overwhelming force and perfect timing. 17 Council worlds fell in the first week. The Krell fleets moved through space like a dark wave, crushing any resistance they met. They enslaved populations and burned everything that stood against them. The Galactic Council held emergency meetings. The great powers of the galaxy gathered to plan their response. But centuries of peace had made them cautious and slow. They calculated force numbers, debated different strategies, and designed careful plans that would keep their own casualties low. Meanwhile, worlds burned, and people died. Admiral Frank Patterson commanded the human fleet. It was a collection of 30 warships that represented Earth's entire military presence in deep space. His ships were smaller than the Vexar dreadnoughts. They were less advanced than the Thrix cruisers. They were far fewer in number than the Quorum swarms. But when the call came to defend the colony world of Sanctuary, the human fleet was the first to respond. Sanctuary was not a rich world or a strategic location. It was a refugee planet where 3 million people from fallen worlds had gathered. They were families who had lost everything, children who had watched their homes burn, old people who had nowhere else to go. The Krell were coming for them. Commander Bryce Taylor stood at the tactical station on the bridge of the USS Sovereign, Frank's flagship. He looked at his screens with worry. "Sir, we are outnumbered 4-1. The Krell have 2 battle groups heading for the planet. If we engage them, we will be destroyed." Frank studied the tactical display. His face showed the lines and scars of 30 years in Earth's Navy. He had fought in the Unity Wars that had nearly destroyed his homeworld. He knew what it meant to face impossible odds. "How long until the Council fleets arrive?" he asked. 36 hours, sir. They are moving into position for a coordinated attack. Frank nodded slowly. "And how long until the Krell reach Sanctuary?" 6 hours, sir. The Admiral looked around his bridge at the men and women who served with him. They had been through countless missions together. They trusted him with their lives. "We buy those refugees 36 hours, Frank said simply. "All ships, move into combat formation. We are going in." The human fleet accelerated toward Sanctuary. 30 ships against 120 Krell warships. By all logic, it should have been a quick massacre. The Battle of Sanctuary lasted 34 hours. The human ships fought with intensity that shocked both their allies and enemies. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, they used their ships as ramming weapons. When their shields failed completely, they kept fighting anyway. When retreat was the smart choice, they held their positions. Captain Ethan Brooks commanded the USS Defender. His ship took critical damage early in the battle. The hull was breached in multiple places. Half his crew was dead or wounded. But he kept fighting. When his engines failed and his ship began drifting, he made a decision. He aimed the Defender at a Krell carrier and pushed the remaining power to the thrusters. His final message was short and clear. For Sanctuary, the Defender hit the carrier at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire. Commander Victoria Lane commanded the USS Ranger. She held position at the planet's orbital gate for 6 hours, taking fire from 3 different directions. Her ship was being torn apart, piece by piece. When her bridge was hit and started venting atmosphere, she ordered her crew to evacuate. But she stayed at her station, manually targeting weapons with her bare hands, even as the cold of space crept in. She fired until the ship's reactor went critical and everything ended in light. Throughout the battle, Admiral Frank Patterson coordinated the defense from the USS Sovereign. His face was hard as stone as he watched his ships die one by one. But he never wavered. He never considered retreat. "All remaining ships, tighten the formation," he ordered, as the Krell prepared their final assault. Only 9 human ships were still fighting. "We hold until the Council arrives or until we are all dead. No retreat, no surrender." The Council fleets arrived with 2 hours to spare. The combined power of the galaxy's greatest military forces hit the Krell like a hammer. The enemy forces broke apart and ran, but by then, only 7 human ships were still functional. The USS Sovereign was drifting in space, her engines destroyed, and her hull torn open in a dozen places. Admiral Frank Patterson was pulled from the wreckage by a Vexar rescue team. His body was broken. Multiple bones were shattered. Internal injuries were severe. But he was still alive. The Vexar doctors worked to save him on their medical ship. As they repaired his damaged body with a mix of medicine and cybernetic implants, he woke up briefly. His voice was weak. "Did we hold?" he asked. The Vexar commander stood beside his bed. Its crystalline form pulsed with colors that showed deep respect. "You held, Admiral. All 3 million refugees are safe. Every single one." Frank tried to smile through the pain. "But Admiral," the Vexar continued, "your fleet is gone. 23 ships destroyed. 7 so damaged they will never fight again. Your casualties are over 90%. Frank closed his eyes. Then it was worth it. News of the Battle of Sanctuary spread through the galaxy faster than light-speed communication. The elder species who had calculated that the refugees should be evacuated and the world abandoned were forced to face an uncomfortable truth. Humanity fought not because it was logical or smart. They fought because it was right. The Krell Empire held emergency war councils. For the first time in their history, they began to reconsider their invasion plans. An enemy that would sacrifice everything for strangers was an enemy that could never truly be defeated. You could destroy their ships and kill their soldiers, but you could not break their will. One Krell war leader spoke to the High Command. We have conquered 40 species. We have crushed armies twice our size. But these humans are different. They do not fight to win. They fight to protect, and they will never stop. On Earth, memorials were held for the crews of the lost ships. Their sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, had died protecting others, had died standing against evil, had died proving that humanity meant what it said. Admiral Frank Patterson spent months recovering from his injuries. Parts of his body were replaced with cybernetic implants. He would never be the same, physically, but when he was strong enough to stand again, he requested to return to duty. The request was approved immediately. The galaxy had learned an important lesson at Sanctuary. When humans drew a line and said they would defend it, they meant it absolutely. When they promised to protect you, they would die to keep that promise. It was not logical. It was not efficient. But it was undeniably powerful. And it changed everything. The war continued for another year after the Battle of Sanctuary. It was a grinding conflict that consumed resources and destroyed lives across the galaxy. The Krell Empire fought with savage determination, but they found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. Wherever human forces were stationed, the defenses held strong. Wherever human ships patrolled space, the Krell advance stopped. It was not because human technology was better. It was not because human forces had greater numbers. It was because humanity refused to accept defeat. They refused to abandon their allies. They refused to calculate how many lives were acceptable to lose. And slowly, grudgingly, the other species of the Galactic Council began to learn from the humans. The Vexar, who had always prioritized preserving their crystalline forms above all else, began volunteering for dangerous missions alongside human vessels. The Thrix, who had spent millennia calculating optimal survival strategies, started standing their ground in battles they would have previously fled. The Quorum, who had drifted through space for eons, avoiding all conflict, organized defensive fleets to protect vulnerable colonies. The galaxy was changing. And humanity was the reason why. General Nicole Grant stood in the war room of Council Command, studying the strategic display with representatives from every major species. The Krell Empire had pulled back to their core systems. Their expansion had stopped. Their fleets were battered and weakened. The Vexar military coordinator spoke in its translated voice. We have an opportunity. The Krell are weak now. If we press our advantage, we could push into their territory. We could force a complete surrender. Nicole shook her head firmly. No, we end this with negotiated peace. The Thrix general clicked its limbs in confusion. That is illogical. We have military superiority now. We should use it. And then what? Nicole challenged. She looked around the room at all the alien faces, some of which had become familiar after years of working together. We occupy their worlds? We control their people? We become exactly what we have been fighting against? She continued in a strong voice. Humanity did not come to the stars to conquer. We came to explore, to learn, to build something better than what we left behind on Earth. The Krell attacked because they saw the Council as weak and divided. They thought we would not fight for anything. We have proven them wrong. Now we need to prove we are strong enough to offer mercy. The debate went on for days. Species argued back and forth. Some wanted complete victory. Others feared the Krell would just attack again later. Eventually, a narrow majority agreed to offer peace terms. The human delegation, led by Ambassador Claire Foster, would conduct the negotiations. The meeting happened on a neutral station in deep space. The Krell High Command sent war leader Karn, a massive warrior whose body was covered in battle scars and military decorations. He entered the negotiating chamber with obvious contempt for the whole process. Claire stood to greet him. Her small human form looked tiny next to the Krell's huge presence. War leader Karn, thank you for coming. Karn's growl was translated by the station's computer systems. I come because my people are dying, not because I respect your diplomatic games. Then we have something in common. Claire replied calmly. Because I am here. Because people on both sides have died. And I want the killing to stop. The negotiations were difficult and took weeks. The Krell demanded territory. They claimed historical grievances that went back centuries. They insisted on maintaining their full military strength. Claire listened patiently to everything they said. Then she laid out humanity's terms. No territory changes, she said in a firm voice. All current borders remain as they are. But we open trade relations between our peoples. We establish cultural exchange programs. We create a joint task force to patrol the border regions together. She leaned forward. You Krell want to test yourselves against worthy opponents? We will give you real challenges. Exploration, missions to the most dangerous regions of space, rescue operations in hostile environments, scientific expeditions to unstable systems. You can channel that warrior spirit into something that builds instead of destroys. Karn leaned back in his chair. His expression was impossible to read. You offer us partnership after we invaded your allies' worlds? After we killed thousands of your people? Yes, Claire said simply. Because the alternative is more war, more death, more destruction until one side completely destroys the other. That is not victory. That is just waste. The Krell war leader sat in silence for a long moment. The room was completely quiet. Finally, he spoke. I have fought in hundreds of battles. I have defeated dozens of enemies across the galaxy. But I have never encountered an opponent like humanity. You fight like the fiercest demons when threatened, then offer peace like saints when you win. You are the most confusing species I have ever met. Claire smiled slightly. We have been called worse things. The peace treaty was signed 3 weeks later. The Krell Empire joined the Galactic Council as a provisional member. Their military fleets were assigned to joint operations with Council forces. It was not a perfect peace. There was still tension and mistrust, but it held. 2 years after the war ended, Admiral Frank Patterson attended a ceremony at Council Command. His body was still healing from the Battle of Sanctuary. Cybernetic implants had replaced damaged organs and broken bones, but he stood straight and proud as the presiding arbiter addressed the assembled delegates from across the galaxy. The galaxy has changed, the massive Vexar announced. Its crystalline form glowed with ceremonial colors. For thousands of years, we elder species believed that logic and calculation were the highest forms of civilization. We measured success only in efficiency. We valued preservation of our own lives above all else. The arbiter paused. Its attention turned to the human delegation. Then, humanity arrived. A young species with inferior technology and small numbers. By all our calculations, they should have remained insignificant in galactic affairs. Instead, they taught us something we had forgotten over the millennia. They reminded us that civilization is not built on calculations, but on courage. That progress comes not from avoiding risk but from facing it directly. That the true measure of a society is not how efficiently it operates, but how fiercely it protects those who cannot protect themselves. The arbiter approached Frank, holding a crystalline medallion in its manipulator appendages. Admiral Patterson, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I present you with the Star of Unity. It is the highest honor we can give. You and your crew held the line at Sanctuary when all logic said to retreat. You sacrificed everything for people you had never met, from worlds you had never visited. You showed us what it truly means to be civilized. Frank accepted the medallion. His scarred hands closed around the smooth crystal. With respect, Arbiter, I did not do anything special. I did what any human would do in that situation. We look at impossible odds and decide they are not impossible enough to stop us. We see people in danger, and we cannot walk away. We face the darkness, and we refuse to let it win. He looked out at the gathered delegates, representatives from dozens of species who had fought and died together. That is not just humanity's strength. That is what we can all be, if we choose it. The galaxy does not need humanity to lead it. It just needs to remember that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. Everyone honored all those who had fallen in the war. Human, Vexar, Thrix, Quarim, Dalthine, and yes, even Krell warriors. All of them were remembered. All of them were honored as heroes. As the delegates left the chamber, Claire Foster stood beside Frank. They looked out at the stars through the station's huge viewport. "We did it," she said quietly. "Against all the odds, we actually did it." Frank nodded slowly. "We counted on the strength of humans, and hope was renewed." Just like the old saying, Claire smiled. "That Spanish is terrible, Admiral." "Maybe," Frank agreed with a slight grin. "And when you combine human determination with hope, you create something the universe has not seen before." "What is that?" "A reason to believe that tomorrow can be better than today." Far below them, on Earth, in the cities and towns where humanity had been born and raised, people looked up at the night sky. Their children learned in schools about the alien species they had befriended, about the battles their people had fought, about the peace they had won together. They learned that humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and they learned that their presence had changed the galaxy forever. The age of isolation was over. The age of unity had begun, and, at the heart of it all, impossible to measure with numbers but undeniable in its impact, was the simple human belief that hope was always worth fighting for, that courage could overcome any obstacle, that the true measure of strength was not in what you conquered but in what you protected. The galaxy had counted on the strength of humans, and hope had been renewed across the stars.